Welcome back. So we're on part 6 of this mini series on how to grow your own mushrooms. 3.5 weeks ago, we inoculated these bags, and now most of them are ready. So before you touch the bags, we're gonna wear our gloves and we're going to apply some rubbing alcohol. The reason we've had so much success with these bags is from our practice of using gloves and sanitation with our isopropyl alcohol. So we don't want to stop now. So I'm going to apply some rubbing alcohol here, and let's talk about these bags. Now you can see all these are at least 50% white on the actual viewfinding window. Now even one that is a little less is actually a lot more than you think. It's just a couple centimeters of grains that haven't been overtaken by the mycelium yet. But these are ready to go. Once I see 50-50 ratio or more, that means the bags are ready to go to the substrate. It's okay if some of those grains aren't white. They will actually still be food for our mushroom bodies. So once we get to this point, we are ready. Now, if you get to the point where 100% of this window is white, that means the bag really needs to go to substrate. And if you're absolutely not ready for substrate yet, then what you want to do is throw them in the fridge. It's going to slow down the growth, and it almost puts the mycelium into a suspended animation. And they can stay in the fridge for a month, even 2 months. So you want to keep an eye on those bags. Don't leave them in the box if the whole bag is fully inoculated, because the bag will go bad. Now let's talk about these 2 bags here, which don't have anything on the viewfinder window. Now, if it just feels like rice and there wasn't much clumping anyway, it's likely that the bag did not take. Now, in this case, it is rock hard everywhere except the very bottom. That's great news. That means that this bag is going to work even though you're not seeing anything in the viewfinder window. Just give the bag a couple more days and it'll be ready. Now I know I said that I only mush once, but in this case, since all these are going and I want to speed up the process on these last 2 bags, what I'm gonna do is give it one more mushing, just like we did before. Just break up the mycelium, kind of work the bottom grains up and in. I'm gonna get it into a nice cake again and just put it back in the box for a couple more days. I will guarantee this one will be looking just like all these in a couple days. So what I'm gonna do before I touch any of these bags is reapply my rubbing alcohol. We've been very sanitary this whole time, which is why 10 out of 10 of these bags are gonna be viable. So don't stop doing that now. Anytime you touch these bags, you should be applying. So what we're gonna do is I am going to show you exactly how I combine my grain spawn with my substrate. We're gonna do it all on camera. So let me adjust this and you can see exactly what I do. Okay, so we're ready to get started here. The first thing we wanna do, apply some rubbing alcohol to our gloves here. And I want you to spray the lid of this. Even though I already did this last time I cleaned it, it's never too much. So we're gonna give it one last go here and make sure we get every nook and cranny of this and the lid. Okay. And once we have this all wiped down, put your lid back on. You don't want any contaminants to get in there now. So I'm gonna put this aside let's take a look at the 2 bags that I've decided to use. These were the 2 furthest along. Like I said, 95% inoculated. Don't worry about these grains that aren't yet white. They are still going to be food for our mushroom bodies. So I'm going to put this aside, reapply, and then I'm going to get out my substrate. Now, if you had to make a whole batch, then this has been basically sitting in that boiling water for 24 hours. So the temperature will be perfect. You don't want to put hot substrate into your stuff. So just be cognizant of that. So even though I mixed this a long time ago and it looks pretty well mixed, I'm still gonna give it one last little mix up here. Now, let's talk about field capacity. That's a term in the mushroom industry, and it basically refers to how wet the soil is. So if you made the batch the way that I said you should, you will have perfect field capacity. Basically what you want is if you grab it and I squeeze just a little, no water is coming out of this. But if I squeeze it really hard, I get some drops. That is perfect field capacity for our grain spawn here. So this is perfect. So what I'm gonna do is quite simply take my bin and I'm gonna put 2.5 inches of my substrate here. Now, if you don't want to go over 4 inches. You really want to stick to 3 inches. And the reason I'm doing 2.5 is I'm going to mix the grain spawn. Then we're going to put a casing layer, which is just going to be substrate on top. So don't worry, you don't have to measure it. Just try and get it as close to 2.5 inches as possible. So that is about where we are right here. Now I'm gonna put my lid back on my substrate. Got to keep that sanitary. And now we are ready to add our grain spawn. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open it up. This is gonna be the big reveal here. And as you can see, all white. And I'm gonna mix it, or I'm gonna break it up in the bag while it's here, because we wanna break this up once it goes in there. And it's just easier, you touch it less when you do a rough breakup in the bag here. The smell is really distinct. It smells a little like mushrooms. It's got a unique smell that definitely smells like mushrooms. So what I'm gonna do is just dump one bag, not at all. Get every grain in there, because every single one of these grains of rice is basically has the potential of being a mushroom. So then we're gonna break up all these clumps here. It's okay if there's little clumps like this, that's okay, but you don't want clumps like this. You really wanna break it up as much as possible here. Just make sure you don't touch anything, and if you do touch something, then make sure to reapply your rubbing alcohol. For right now, I'm only touching this inoculated grain. So get all the little clumps out. So you can use just one bag of Uncle Ben's rice for a bin this big. You can use 2 as well. And really, to determine if you should use 1 or 2 is your sanitation practices. Because basically, if you put 2 bags of grain spawn in this, then you're gonna get several flushes, but you're only gonna get those flushes if you keep everything sanitary. So really, whether you use 1 or 2, depends on how many flushes you think you can get or that you want to get. I have really great sanitary practices, so I am going to be putting 2 bags in this. You don't want to put more than 2 bags in a bin this big. You basically want a 1-to-1 to a 2-to-1 ratio of spawn to substrate. That being 2 parts substrate and 1 part grain spawn. And this looks just about perfect. So now that I have this, just breaking up the little clumps, now I'm gonna mix it up. Mix it up, mix it up. Don't put 2 bags in at once. Do 1 bag, mix it up, and then do your next bag, because then you won't miss as many clumps, trust me. So that looks pretty good there. And now it's time to put our second bag in. Here's the reveal. Looking really healthy, nice and white. If you happen to see like anything that doesn't look white, like if it's gray or black, throw that bag away. It's actually a good idea to open these bags in a different room, because if there is a bunch of contamination in there, millions of spores will go into the space that you're in and cause contamination. So just something to keep in mind. I've heard some people really like to even open these bags outside just to check them. But we are looking great here. Once again, I'm just breaking up in the bag so I don't have to touch it as much. And I'm gonna put this right on top. Get every grain in there. And then begin doing the exact same thing. We're gonna be breaking up these clumps. Oh, the smell is just incredible. It's a very unique smell. It smells a lot like mushrooms, but it is just, for a mushroom grower, this smells like heaven. Just kind of smells really earthy, and I would think what umami smells like. That is exactly what this smells like. So breaking everything up. Now don't go to painstaking lengths to get every clump. Just make sure you get the big ones. So once that is broken up, looks pretty good here. Got a couple more here. Then we want to do another mix up here. So that looks really good. We got about a 1-to-1 ratio. Maybe it's closer to 2-to-1 or somewhere in between. But that is fantastic. So get a nice even layer. Nice and even. We're at about 2.5 inches right now of substrate and grain spawn. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a casing layer. I'm just gonna do a 1/2 inch, and I'm basically just going to do it by hand, because now you don't want to mix up. You want this substrate to be on top as a casing layer here. So going nice and slow is the way to go. Well, that looks pretty good right there. Lid back on. And I'm also gonna do one last thing. Now, there's something that's called side pinning, and that happens when mushrooms start growing out of the side of the cake instead of the middle. So what I like to do is I will push down all the way around on the edges. Now, don't compact it like so much, but we're just forming a nice cake here. These are gonna dry up, especially after we do a couple flushes, and they will actually shrink where there's an inch on each side here. That's unavoidable, and that's just a part of it. But for this first one, I like to do this to promote a nice rectangular cake here. So that is exactly what we're looking for. And what I'm gonna do now is place my lid on, and that is it. So now that we have our grain spawn and substrate all mixed up and ready to go, the last thing to do is to label your bins. Now, if you're growing multiple varieties like I do, you really need to do this because you're not gonna be able to tell the difference between certain species of mushrooms. Just make it nice and easy on yourself and label it. Now, as for care for this bin, what we're gonna do is nothing. Just put it in the corner of your grow room. You wanna be as close to 80 degrees as possible, but really, anything in the 70s is gonna be okay. So don't go in the 60s because then you really start to run into possibilities of getting contamination. Don't lift the lid, don't touch it. You can look at it through the windows here and see that things are happening. We're gonna be monitoring this exact tub through the rest of the grow series. So you're gonna see exactly where things should be in a rough timeline for at least this strain of mushroom. Yours may grow faster, may grow slower. Just make sure that your temperatures are right and just let the mycelium do its thing. So let's fast forward and start to see this substrate get colonized. Just 24 hours later, we're already seeing that mycelium working its way up to the surface in a couple spots. Now, don't worry if you don't see anything for 3 to even 7 days. It all depends on the species of mushroom you're growing and just how strong that mycelium is. Now, let's take a closer look at some of these spots that we're talking about. And as you can see, it almost looks like mold that grows on a strawberry that has been in the fridge too long. But this is actually not mold. It's actually fungus. And it's exactly what we want to be seeing. So don't be worried that your bin is contaminated, because it does look like traditional mold, quote unquote. So every 24 hours, we're gonna start getting more and more of these spots actually popping up. And then they're gonna start spreading out and getting bigger on top. This is exactly what we wanna see. Now this is day 7 here with this tub. Now I'm happy with the progress we've had after 7 days, but I want you to look at one of the other tubs I did on the same day. So you can see that this tub is even further along than our first tub that we've been monitoring. And the reason is because I've left the lid on this tub. Every time that I took a picture of tub number 1, I've had to remove the lid. And even though it was just a couple seconds to snap a picture, it was enough to change the microclimate in the tub. Every time you remove the lid, you're gonna be replacing the CO2 that's building in these tubs and replace it with oxygen. That's not only going to slow down this process, but it's also introducing possible contamination every time you open the lid. That's why I say that you really want to keep the lids on for at least 7, even up to 14 days. So we're going to start monitoring this tub so you can get an accurate depiction of how long this process takes. So here we are on day 9, once again, just spreading and spreading. Day 10, even more. And then we have day 11 here where it's almost completely white on top. So after 12 days, we're finally starting to see pins. Now this is a nice established pin right in the middle, and even above it you can see a primordial pin. On the other side of the tub we have even more pins. And this is a good picture because you can see all the white little spots. those are about to become pins. So we're definitely pinning pretty hard in this bin. Once you start seeing pins like this, that means it's time to convert this tub, which is basically a humidity dome tub, into a fresh air exchange fruiting chamber. So that's when we're gonna get our full grown mushrooms. It's gonna happen in days, so it's very exciting. We're gonna get all into how to convert this into a fruiting chamber in the next video. So I will see you there.